Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming. We're here to talk about Searsport's initiative for a downtown revitalization plan. The process is just getting started in terms of public input. My name is Travis Pryor. I'm a landscape architect with Wright Pierce. It's a municipal infrastructure and engineering firm based originally out of Topsom for a little bit over 70 years now. I'm going to give a brief introduction. You are welcome to ask questions during this, but I'm not going to, hopefully it's fairly high level and a lot of quick detail. And then we're going to break out into some group sections for about an hour or so and talk about what's important to each of you. We're going to then ask a member of each of those breakout groups to report back to the rest of the audience to talk about the high notes of your discussions. Then we'll have some time for additional, more detailed question and answers, and I'll talk about next steps in the process. Brief introduction. We're working with the town, some of their staff, including James Gilway, the town manager, Dean Bennett, who's your economic development director, myself primarily through Wright Pierce, and then you have a designated downtown revitalization committee. Yes, sir. I'm sorry? Thank you. And most of the committee is here this evening. A little bit of background. The town has done some planning over the past decade and a half, and the purpose of this project is not to reinvent the wheel. It's to focus a little bit more on a specific downtown revitalization plan that hopefully marries well with the recent comprehensive planning they've been doing, as well as some of the planning they've been doing with the Maine Department of Transportation and Route 1. The vision statement from your latest comprehensive plan highlights some really key things that are unique and distinctive to Searsport. A lot of it is focused around economic and quality of life balances related to marine industries and infrastructure and seafaring heritage and history of your community. And to support educational opportunities around that, as well as either to publicly promote, potentially, and finance that way of life, or to attract private investment to continue to live in that manner. So why develop a downtown plan? We are hoping to make some improvements to your community based on goals and initiatives. Some of them can be small pieces. They can be ordinance changes. They can be aesthetic improvements to some of your buildings. Some of them can be more significant infrastructure improvements, expansion of utilities, public parking. There are a variety of different pieces. And also to comply with the state's goals for downtown plan components, which will then make you eligible for what's called tax increment financing. It's an ability to capture local tax dollars and spend them on specific improvements for your community versus state sharing, as well as to make yourself eligible for state and federal grants and funds. And talk a little bit about the goals for tonight's public input. The overall downtown revitalization goal is really to come up with a clear consensus, publicly supported vision for what you'd like to see in your downtown. To develop an actionable plan, not just something with a lot of pretty pictures and really well-written narrative that we'll pat ourselves on the back on and then put on the shelf, but really to come up with an action set of items. The last few pages of the report is really the most important piece in our mind. It gives you a framework to pick at in the next 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, and maybe a little bit further out. And then to conform with the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development standards for downtown plan components, so you're eligible for various state and federal funding programs. A little bit about the downtown. So you have Route 1 as your main corridor through it, and ownership and partnership with the Maine Department of Transportation. The main Penobscot Marine Museum. You have a variety of mixed uses and different zoning within your downtown. You have a lot of historic architecture and really nice backbone for a lot of the buildings right on Main Street. And then strong local presence and coastal connection. Your schools are in your downtown. You have a Museum on the Streets program to help promote some of the history and heritage. There's the Head of Bay Business Alliance, which is most a locally supported group, as well as part of the Regional Economic Development Program. A lot of public utilities are already in place. Somewhat, I believe, are fairly minimal or lack of public parking. And a lot of your civic facilities are also located within your downtown in terms of this office, the public library, Department of Public Works, and so on. So the regional context, Route 1 is obviously the main corridor for most of coastal Maine north of Brunswick and up to Searsmont. That involves a lot of traffic congestion, particularly in the summer, that everyone is used to. So we're at Penobscot Bay as a recreational destination. You're starting the initiative for the Maine Ocean School. There's the Port of Searsport, which is on an international scale, regional context. The Central Maine and Quebec Railway associated with some of your industries as well. There's Eastern Maine Development Corporation, which is a quasi-municipal regional economic development planning commission. And then the Waldo County Action Plan, which provides public transit and some other regional services. And there may be a host of other things on there. What we've done to date is met with the committee, talked a little bit about what you've done in the past, and then done some preliminary research on your community. The Maine Department of Economic Community Development has some fairly specific plan components similar to developing a comprehensive plan. One of them, and first and foremost, is public input, making sure that the downtown plan represents the goals of the community. We look at the economy and different employment opportunities and the current conditions of that environment. We look at a variety of housing that's available, affordable housing, some historic housing, multi-unit apartments, and so on. Parking, I do an inventory assessment of on-street and off-street parking, what's available to the public and what's controlled by private ownership. Recreational opportunities, utility infrastructure, water and sewer, and a lot of overhead utilities in the downtown. Transportation, so the waterfront coastal connections, you have Route 1, as well as some rail traffic, and then a system of inland and more rural roads. Walkability, sidewalks, where are they now? A lot of your Main Street is in the process of being designed and potentially upgraded here in the near future with the Maine Department of Transportation. Some of it's about connecting to your schools and other areas of the downtown that aren't just Main Street, but some of the adjacent neighborhoods as well. Signage is one of the somewhat low-hanging fruits that a lot of these downtown revitalization initiatives start with. Signage just in terms of letting folks know where parking is and so on, and some of your basic facilities. You can see an example of what Belfast has done relatively recently. They've been through a lot of this planning process over the past decade or so. We look at the quality and character of your buildings. A lot of times when you make upgrades or you want to reinvest in your downtown, and Maine has a lot of historic downtown buildings, there's some obstacles or hurdles sometimes in terms of building codes and whether you need an elevator or access to second story or third story space that may be somewhat underutilized and might be better purposed as apartments, things that people can live in and then walk, work and play within the downtown community. And then coming up with a capital improvement plan to fund some of the goals that you like to do. The town goes through, say, a capital improvement budget every year for a variety of municipal services. And if you're going to make some of these downtown improvements, some of them invariably will require some level of local cost. And then we look at the downtown goals in terms of their consistency with your comprehensive plan, which is just in the process of updating. In terms of some of the areas that you may need to change or tweak some of your ordinances in order to help revitalize or realize the vision of the quality of the place that you're looking for, whether it be parking at the back of the buildings, maybe some streetscape improvements, and so on. All right, so that was a lot of information to kind of cruise through real quickly. The primary goal here of tonight's meeting is to now break out into sessions. We have 4 tables and we have some facilitators. Break out into groups of about 6 to 8 people at each table. I'd encourage you to sit with new folks maybe that you're not familiar with within the community. Hopefully spur a variety of discussion. If you're not comfortable speaking as well at these tables, that's perfectly understandable too. You just want to listen and participate tonight. We also have some surveys that the town's been distributing, and I have some additional hard copies. Whether you fill those out after the meeting, or we'd encourage you to take them out to the rest of the community if you have neighbors or other folks you know who couldn't be here, and hand those out to them. We're going to give people another couple weeks to fill those out and then turn them back in to the town. So with that said, everyone can get up and stretch a little bit. If you haven't signed the sign-in sheet at the back of the room, please do so. And I will float around between the tables, and we have 4 facilitators who are ready to record some of your conversations. Thank you. About 6 to 8, I think. I think there's close to 30 people here, so. All right, thank you again all for coming to some good conversations I got to overhear a little bit, some pieces of, and at this point we'd like to have each group report back. I've been told we are being recorded on television and by microphone, so if you're comfortable with it as a representative of your group, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the microphone and speaking. We'll start with Dean's table first, so the table all the way over on the left.
Okay, well, interesting discussion. We spent a lot of time on the first question talking about the vision, and consequently, it was interesting. We kind of answered all the rest of the questions during the discussion on the first question. In terms of what are the old vision of downtown, it was an interesting perspective. One is that they'd like to see a central focus on the downtown, more visibility, so that when you're coming down the road, you know when you're in Searsport, into the heart of Searsport, if you would. One of the comments was that the bridge by Norris Street, as you come in and you get to the bridge, you slow down, there's a winding curve down into town. The uses start becoming more commercial, the density is greater, and you feel like you've come into some place, if you will. And some thought that was a good place for a, welcome to Searsport, you're in Searsport type of thing now in terms of the Searsport downtown. I felt that parking is limited, that with 18 to 20,000 cars a day going through, you imagine, in the summertime, it certainly does create a congestion problem and demand for parking, which simply isn't there some of the time. Service-based businesses are important, as important as tourist-type businesses. The committee felt that what the town really would, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, the committee felt that pharmacies, those types of uses were needed, certainly as much as, if not more than, a touristy type of gift shop that tends to come and go. Maybe that concentration on those types of service-based businesses, retail businesses that would support the citizens of Searsport and their needs would be important in that downtown area. Adequate parking, adequate signage, and in terms of the location of the downtown, because of the interest in creating a welcoming visibility, if you will, as you come into Searsport, now you're in town, and at what point do you leave the downtown? It was interesting to try to envision coming in, going north, and then coming into the town, going south, and try to capture what it is that you feel as though you're in town. At what point in time do you feel as though you're in town? And the group felt that the Norris Road to Mortland Road principally is the downtown, if you will, of the community. And then as you progress north, the uses, the density is starting to spread out further. It becomes more commercial, more industrial. And then as you're going south, once you go across the bridge, principally becomes more rural residential as you go out that way, and it's almost like the town stretches from that point. So, if there was a concise downtown, the group felt that Norris to Moreland would serve the question, I should say. And I believe that's what I got. Did I miss anything? Well, quiet over there. That's it, Travis.
All right, thank you. Group number 2, call it.
Ours was exactly the same, so I don't have to say anything.
That's great. We want consensus.
No, we started out with defining the downtown, and basically kind of thought from Prospect Street to Navy Street was the downtown, but that from stream to stream, where the Mill Pond stream to the stream by the old scene loft, the Hamilton Learning Center, that was the heart of the downtown, even though it stretched beyond that. As far as our overall vision for downtown, of course, maintain and keep the brick buildings, but with some additional maintenance somehow. Some plans, attract businesses and keep its character. We talked about the themes and shipbuilding or ships, or even an actual ship like an old sailing ship somewhere downtown. Jack remembers when there was one past Peter Mason's office between that and the church, and it was quite an attraction. So we thought of that. We thought that was a good idea. Other things like signage, like Bucksport has with ships and boats on it. Lobsters was brought up, maybe like the Bear Project in downtown Belfast. Instead, have lobsters that are decorated as points to find as a visitor or tourist. 3 most important ideas regarding downtown revitalization. Dealing with utilities was on that list, including getting them out of the sidewalk. We have terrible walkability on each side of town because they planted, either we built sidewalks around the telephone poles, or the telephone poles were driven in the middle of our sidewalks. That has to be repaired. Plus, changing the downtown utilities to make them more attractive. They have to be pedestrian friendly, which is what fits in with dealing with utilities. And parking, some ideas on how to increase the parking in the downtown, and it led into some kind of fix to Goodell and Route 1. That's been a problem for the town for many years, especially with egress from Mount Ephraim Road. And the overall presentation of the town as a grabber, Penobscot Marine Museum could help with that. And I mentioned that our new director's here. So I know she's listening. Something as a grabber. And then the businesses, we agreed, some kind of professional offices, doctors' offices, welcoming art businesses, more restaurants, a gift shop, camping type stores, rental of outdoor things, hardware store, and encouraging them maybe to stay open a little bit later so that we don't roll the sidewalks up at 5. Off script, I have a whole bunch of notes because I was interested in all the conversations. Let me go to a couple of the interesting ones. A walking trail, perhaps around the mill pond. That was an offshoot that was very enticing, very interesting to think that maybe we could make a trail that circled, because we'd be in the downtown and it would be an interesting attraction for people. Great idea. Bring a village sign, a sign to identify the village coming. I'll give you the example. Winterport has one. It says village ahead, and then I think it was I don't know who brought it up, but historic village area instead of just village ahead. Bicycle rentals, and make it bicycle friendly, and we'd have it all in a nutshell.
Sounds doable. Phyllis's group.
I can't say the same.
I was going to say what he said.
You can.
We spent the most amount of time trying to define the boundaries of downtown as a starter, and agreed generally Norris to Mortland was the basic core of the downtown. Of course, the overall vision is to attract more businesses, which means how do you create an environment in which people choose to bring their business ventures here. And part of that is, of course, visual, how we present the town, how it is marketed. And that came up a lot about promotion and marketing the town. Of course, if you're filling the storefronts, you need parking. But the idea of creating events that we could use for promotion of the town, which included the idea of maybe a monthly nighttime walking tour with the museum or the shop staying open. There's great interest in all of the items. There were a few that were seemed not particularly relevant to the downtown as we were defining it. Ideas for businesses were a bookstore, restaurants, flower store, art gallery. Parking comes up continuously. Promoting our seafaring history and signage, creating signage that is very specific and visually appealing. Those were all items that came up over and over again. Maintaining the integrity and the character of the downtown, we all seem to think was important, but then promoting it because of its integrity and historical value could mean a lot to how we promote ourselves and how we create more, what was the word somebody used? Okay, it's a what? Ambiance, thank you, Marie. How do you have it not be a drive-through town? And that part of it is how you make the buildings attractive, the signs attractive, the street lights, the sidewalks, all of that. And personally, I don't want to forget the harbor. People don't know it's there. It's a beautiful harbor. It's a beautiful parking area. There are more events that could be promoted or done down there that I think would look what happens for July 4th, the fireworks. The place is filled. Otherwise, I think we pretty much have repeated almost everything that everybody else has said. The one thing Karen brought up that I thought was really important, and I'm just throwing this back at her because I agree with her, we don't have input from the youngest members of our community. And this is their future we're talking about. And how do we get our younger people involved in the committee work and the planning and the promotion of the community? Anything else from anybody in our group? Okay. You're supposed to be cheering.
Thank you. I don't want to hold this too close to me so it doesn't go off again. But last group, I'll call group 4. Thank you.
We also sort of identified the same boundaries. We had what we called the core of downtown, which was from Pumpkin Patch or just before the mill stream to Mortland Road. But we also identified a business district as extending all the way to Sunoco or maybe even as far as Sears Island. And we felt that the sidewalk proposed improvements were going to be very important to connect all of these areas so that people would travel beyond the core of downtown. We also talked quite a bit about the beginning of the core, which is the Millstream Bridge, which is kind of an ugly bridge. And it originally was a granite bridge, and there was a lot of discussion in the group about taking down the utility guardrails, maybe bringing it back to granite, having flowers, and going along with what other people said, maybe there would be trails to the side, something to make people, sort of stop and say, oh, look at this beautiful little village we're coming into. And that would also hopefully help to slow down the traffic. And we also discussed not speed bumps, because that would be disastrous, but maybe some almost like rumble strips as you came down to the bridge and you're trying to get people to slow down their speed. We felt also standardized signage and parking signs was very important. We also discussed a bit about bike lanes and how we all like bike lanes and we think they're important, but they also take up a large part of the road. So we came up with a little proposal that maybe for the core of downtown there could be a bike lane detour. So perhaps you would turn off at the Black Road, go down to Union Street, and then come back on Reservoir Street, and then get back onto Route 1. And that would take you past the library, the town hall, and the museum. And then going east, perhaps the bike trail would turn on Mossman Street and go down by the park and then come back up through Elm Street. So that would not take away the parking in downtown, which might have to go away if you had really wide bike lanes going through downtown. There was also some discussion about considering having some of the 10 streets that come into the downtown area in a small amount of time become one-way streets during the summer. And Dick had talked about how this had worked in another community, I guess Long Island, where you had lived. And that people opposed it at first, but then they became very used to it, and it saved some of the congestion. Talked about a possibility under transportation of maybe using school buses to provide more access from people in North Searsport to get into town that don't always have a way to get into town for services. Of course, we want downtown to be beautiful with trees, flowers, lots of caretaking, and more businesses. Identified parking, restaurants, bakeries, identify all of our assets, which would be parking, the museum, and Mossman Park. The only other, I had an idea after traveling earlier this summer out in Colorado. We were in a community, Loveland, that had a beautiful sculpture park, and I had never been to one before. And I was thinking about, I don't know of any sculpture parks in Maine, and perhaps that would be to take an area of a park. You ask artists to submit sculptures for maritime history or the ocean. We could have a theme, and that could be something that would draw people to the area. And I think that's about what we talked about. Anybody else?
Great. The off buttons on the bottom. Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, there was something that came up at several of our meetings. The cruise ships come into Belfast and bring an awful lot of people, and they walk the town. Whether or not it was possible to somehow figure out a way of transporting some of those passengers to Searsport to visit the museum and the shops. You know, is there a way to do a public transit back and forth? Because that's a huge number of people visiting the area every year.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll follow up on that. That's a big part of what's going on in Portland or even in Bar Harbor, that folks get off and then they look at regional bus systems that have been supported over time. You can still hear this one. It was also brought up, I think, at one of the groups talking about you're on the main boat cruise kind of destination tour for your port, so maybe you'll attract some of those boats here as well directly too. All right, thank you. That was a lot of great input, and thank you all for recording it as well. That will help me out immensely. I'm going to talk a little bit about next steps in the process. So we're at the initial step I mentioned at the beginning, gathering general public input, a fairly open-ended discussion. Our goal is to synthesize all this data. I gave out a few extra copies of the survey. The town will have some more that are available. Can't leave that too open-ended, but for a couple weeks, basically until the 1st of August, we're going to leave that open if you want to tell friends and neighbors and others to fill that out. That is extremely valuable. And then we will compile all that data as well as the wealth of information about the community that we already have and start to develop what we think or what we heard were the prioritized items. We're going to present those findings back to the downtown committee, get their consensus. So yeah, we heard everything in the public input process, and then start to develop a draft plan in August and September, showing some examples of what some of these things might look like or look like in other communities. Maybe some photo renderings of what some streetscape improvements, for example, might look like on Main Street above and beyond what DOT is planning to do. Come back for a second public hearing, a similar format to this, only without the breakout sessions, and present some of those ideas and look for input in terms of what are the top priorities, what are the things that we think we can knock off, or if you'd like to fund, what would you want to put all your money into in the first few years, or what would you like to change for ordinances or organize volunteer, no cost kind of solutions. And then what are some of the things that might be in that 3 to 5 year range, or 5 to 10 years, or maybe 10 years and beyond, and help shape the action plan component, really the end of the report that we think is the most valuable piece for moving things forward. And we'll take all that. Sorry, yes?
One quick question. The preliminary plan in August and September, I was just wondering if maybe there might be a mailing or an outline of the preliminary plan that go out to townspeople to let them know what we're thinking about or what they're thinking about, so that the meeting will have a little more background.
Ahead of time. Yeah, we definitely plan on, so our summary of findings of public input and what the priorities are, we'll present that to the committee, and we'd recommend that the town post that on their website. We also typically do an executive summary right up front, so that should be in pretty good shape at that point, and we'll make sure that we post that ahead of the public workshop. Thank you. I'm sorry, the committee we've been working with or met with to start the process is the Downtown Revitalization Committee. Yep. So after that list of prioritization is established, we will develop a final draft of the downtown plan. Hopefully we're 95% there. We may have missed a segment of the population that may have one or two last things that they want to add to it, but hopefully we've got most of it there, and we'll present that back to the selectmen at a public presentation at that point. Beyond that, then the town will start working on, if it's prioritized for a downtown tax increment financing district. Again, that's an area that allows you to do some prescribed improvements capturing local tax dollars. It'll also position you with that list of action items to start looking at things oftentimes you have a downtown committee in place. You may appoint somebody who's a community development director or a new type of position, or we'll talk about this more with the draft plan, but there's a Main Street approach, which Belfast and Bath and a variety of communities throughout the state have adopted, where you start to have one point person or two that are making sure everyone's kind of on task and organized. The local government can't do this by themselves. The private businesses won't do this by themselves, and volunteers can only do so much. But when the three of those work together and they're coordinated with a concerted effort like a Chamber of Commerce might do, or this Main Street program. So one of your first steps may just be getting that type of person in place to help make sure everyone keeps moving the plan forward. Yes?
I think I can speak to at least 4 members of the committee. We would probably seek a greater articulation of the planning and information and meetings going between you and the community. Just knowing a little more about what's going on.
Yes, ahead of time. Yep. Great. Thank you.
If you've gotten this far, and you say you're ready to agree in the presentation to the committee, the elephant in the room is that so many of the downtown storefronts are not used or not effective with use. What were the big hitters that were suggested in terms of attracting businesses or attracting people to open businesses?
In other communities or for Searsport? We haven't. That's what we're going to work on next. So some of it is in establishing things like a community improvement association or folks that kind of go door to door, and whether businesses are vacant, start approaching some of the, maybe the landlords. There are a lot of folks who live out of state that own businesses here, and if they're not seeing it every day, then having a local volunteer committee who contacts them and says, hey, can we have the local kids paint murals on your windows that are vacant, or we put out some flower boxes, things like that, and start working on that kind of volunteerism. Some of it is setting up the financial programs, revolving loan funds, facade improvement programs, things like that that are a partnership with the town. Oftentimes through state or federal dollars, we'll then do a 50-50 match with some of those businesses to help some of those improvements get started. So that's a lot. There's historic tax credits. We'll talk about, there'll be a section of the report that'll talk about funding strategies as well too. Yes?
How do the ideas that come out of this process meld with DOT's?
So they're a little, they're a little bit ahead of this process. They have said that increasingly they're becoming more context sensitive to communities that have developed downtown plans. You guys have been involved in discussions with them. If this was here ahead of their project for what your visions are, it might be implemented a little bit more. So it'll be more for future projects working with them. If they're going to move forward potentially with construction of some of their improvements next year, this report will be adopted at the end of this year, and it might be a little bit late to influence their plans. I don't know if others from the community can speak to bike paths and whether those are going to be included or not.
They usually say everything's
But at this point, it's my understanding they've invested in and done a fair amount of engineering. I'll stand back.
Hello. Okay. The DOT's plan, they're very conscious of bicycle and pedestrian safety. And I know that was part, when we were doing some of the brainstorming with the committee, even back, we were a context-sensitive community. It started like 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't know.
2007, I think.
We've been at this for 12 years of planning, but when we became a CSS or CCS group, we were talking about the mobility, the ability to get bikes and things through safely, because we do have a squeeze. That's our choke point right where the brick buildings are. But they were very mindful of that. But we were also very insistent that we don't lose any of our parking too, because that's so critical for the businesses downtown. So they have that, and they're working that into their plan. As far as the things I heard tonight about going around town and things, that won't be part of their plan, but something that we could maybe initiate ourselves if we feel that that's something we can move forward. So.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I would just like to reiterate and point out again how we don't have any representation from the Lebanese. That is a consistent theme and challenge that a lot of young families in particular are home right now with their kids, or especially during the school year, it gets even busier. This is pretty typical for what we see, and Maine is an aging state as well too. So this is fairly common what we see throughout the state. Beyond what we're doing for downtown plan, if you do have school functions coming up, if you do have other opportunities to reach out to those particular groups, or I showed a picture of kind of an outdoor gazebo or park. We've done some things associated with festivities. Sometimes as well too, where they've reached out and done additional public input and survey. And these plans aren't static, similar to how you update your comprehensive plan every 10 years. It's important to kind of keep gauging and doing reality checks year after year on how it's going. So there are some creative strategies that you can do to try and get different demographics out to talk to you. And holding a festivity, we just did one of these in Old Town, and they have the canoe festivities, and they have a giant park right on the Penobscot River there. And that was an opportunity where volunteers from their downtown committee were there with surveys and things like that, and actively going out and seeking
input from folks, or voting elections, things like that, if you have an election. We all do, coming up in November. And oftentimes you have bake sales and a lot of tables and things like that out there for other different agenda items as people pass through the voting polls. So thinking creatively about some of those opportunities to reach out to them is important. And a lot more of them use Facebook and things like that these days as well too. So this is being broadcasted, so hopefully some of those families are hearing it. But social media is another good way to let folks know what's going on. Yes, sorry.
Not the generation that we're talking about, but I think a really easy group to tap into and might have some very creative ideas are students in high school.
Yep.
Hard to get them in summer, obviously, but, through the student council would love to have a focus group, these ideas for now.
We've seen that done before. The Brunswick Landing, a naval base redevelopment there was a big project, and that was a long public process, and they had one of the presentations at the high school and did a big similar public workshop, only just with students.
I don't know if it's still true, but it used to be a requirement for graduation from high school to do a certain number of hours of community service. And if that is still true, then that's a potential volunteer group to tap into.
I'm hearing her. So the question was about public process for students. Yep. Yep. One of the other parts that we do that I haven't mentioned is we do a certain amount of stakeholder outreach as well too, whether it's to say like a historical society or some, your local Toziers or other business folks who are busy running their businesses. Some of them are still open at these hours. So we try and reach out to some of those folks as well too, or they've gone home, they live in other communities. Bangor Savings Bank or something, we talk with the bank manager there as well too, and she doesn't live here. So we try and make sure we capture some of what your business community and some of your other kind of nonprofit or other stakeholders in the community's interests are as well too. Those are excellent questions. There's no two ways to do this. I've learned a lot from every community that I've worked in. Any other thoughts or comments? Well, thank you all for coming. This was really good sized crowd for one of these and very productive.